everyone, and welcome to week 9 of English 120. This week, we're going to begin working on our research project. You'll be reading the first 5 chapters of Book 1 of The Valley of the Moon, and we will practice using quotations in our discussion this week. You'll also begin working on writing reflective responses about our reading in your reflection journal, and you will complete your project topic form. Finally, you will have another research lesson due in comp class called Quotation Proficiency. So this is the first part of your research project for this class. Your research topic form is due at the end of the week. This is the first stage in a long journey towards your final research paper. Your project topic form is it's due this following Sunday, a week from today, and you're going to choose a topic for your research paper. You can choose any of the issues or ideas that have come up so far in the Valley of the Moon. Now, I know we haven't been reading for very long, so it's always a good idea to, if you have ideas of things, like the topics we talked about last week in our discussion forum, any of the topics that Professor Tichy brought up in her video about Jack London that we watched last week. But your topic that you choose should be a subject of debate, discussion, and discovery. What your topic form needs to contain are the following. You need to clearly define your topic. What is it exactly? And how does it relate to the Valley of the Moon? How does it relate to the modern day society? How is your topic arguable? What will you do to research this topic? How will you conduct research? And this can be very general at this point, you guys, but you really need to just think about what have you learned so far about approaching research, and how will you go about approaching research for this topic? You want to think about what your draft research question is. Whenever you engage in the process of researching anything, you need to think about what questions will you ask to try and discover an answer to the question you're going to be asking. What your form needs to look like is it needs to be an MLA format like everything else for this class, and it just needs to be at least 1 page long. As always, guys, if you are worried about choosing a topic, please just contact me via email or come by my office hours. I'll be there Monday from 12:30 to 2:30, Tuesday from 1:30 to 2:30, and Wednesday from 12:30 to 2:30, and also by appointment. For this week's discussion forum, we're going to be using quotations. I'd like you to read the required chapters of The Valley of the Moon before you do this week's discussion forum, and to review the handout Quoting Basics, which is also posted under this week's content. For this discussion forum, I'd like you to answer the following questions using quotations from the sources listed here and The Valley of the Moon, the actual text, to support what you're saying. Who was Jack London? Find a quotation in this week's reading that shows what Oakland was like in the early 1900s. Explain why you've chosen this quote. Find a quotation about Saxon or Billy and explain how this quotation tells you about his or her character. Respond to at least 3 of your peers' posts. Tell us, do you agree with what they've chosen? Do you disagree? Why? And remember, as always, your post must be posted, your initial post, by Wednesday for full credit. In this week's active reading journal, you're going to be answering a series of study questions about the chapters you're going to be reading in the Valley of the Moon. Where does chapter 1 take place? Describe the environment in detail. Who's the main character or protagonist, and what do we learn about her? Why do we think she's named Saxon? Where does she live, and who does she live with? What is Weasel Park like? What happens in the foot race? How is the relationship between Billy and Saxon different from the relationship between Bert and Mary? Who is Sarah? What do we learn about her, and how is she different from Saxon? What does she warn Saxon about on page 7? Why does she focus on how many pairs of shoes Saxon has? When London describes Saxon's home in chapter 1, he says the earthquake had left its marks upon the plaster. What earthquake is he referring to? How did the earthquake affect and change the Bay Area? Where is Weasel Park? What happens there? On page 11, Saxon describes her image of God. How does she describe him? What does this description reveal about her? How is her image of God different than Mary's image? On page 12 through 13, Saxon meets Billy Roberts for the first time. What is their meeting like? He is described as a teamster. What is a teamster? What is a prairie schooner? Who was Saxon's mother? What do Billy and Saxon realize they have in common? How are young people different today than they were in the early 1900s? How are they the same? Summarize what you've read so far. What do you predict will happen next in the novel? Your comp class assignment for this week is to complete your research lesson and quiz on quotation proficiency. Alright, that's it for this week, guys. Next week, we're going to continue reading Valley of the Moon, and you're going to start working on your research prospectus, which is a bit more intense, a couple pages long. Alright, if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I look forward to meeting you guys in conference.